Hi, I'm Pete from Steadfast Collective, and I'm today joined by Erica and Ruthie, and we are going to be chatting about missions and values for online communities and why they matter. So I thought it'd be important first if we kick things off by just introducing ourselves. So Erica, do you want to kick things off?
Yes, Erica. I am the director of community at a company called Heslop. It's an entertainment startup that focuses on democratizing and diversifying the entertainment industry. And before that, I was at Reddit for about 10 years, working on the community team, mix of different roles, lots and lots of things. So that's me.
Wonderful. And where in the world are you?
Oh, I'm in Salt Lake City. I am in Utah.
Very
I've been a
nice.
remote worker for about 10 years too. Big fan of remote work.
Very nice. Awesome. And then Ruthie?
Hi, I'm Ruthie. I am the head of community and brand at Yotpo, which is a retention marketing platform for e-commerce businesses. I run various brand programs, including but not limited to our Amazing Women in E-commerce, which is like a industry awards turned community program, and that we also have like a sub community for that too. And I am based in New York.
Nice. And then for those who don't know, I'm Pete. I lead a software company and we build bespoke software for membership organizations and communities to help them gather online. So I love learning from community managers about what makes them tick, what keeps them up at night, what stresses them out, and those kind of things. And I wrote a post called "Why Do Mission and Values Matter for Online Communities?" And I was writing it from my point of view, having worked with a range of online communities, mainly in the UK, kind of seeing it from my point of view. And I reached out to some folk and asked if anybody would be willing to give their point of view. And thankfully, we got some folk who said yes. And that's what we're chatting through today. So I think if we just kick it off with some questions. So why do you think that having clear mission and values make a difference for when you're trying to build your community? Obviously a massive question, but if you're able to contextualize it or concise it down, does anybody want to kick us off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. As I mentioned about Amazing Women in E-commerce, so obviously there's a clear mission and value here, but I'll kind of explain why I think it was so critical in kind of organically building a community around it. I think our mission is to empower, recognize, and highlight women who are doing amazing things in the industry while also investing in the next generation of women business leaders. And for that reason, when we started Amazing Women in E-commerce, we launched it basically asking for nominations. And for every nomination, we donated $5 to Girls Inc. Till now, we've managed to raise $150,000 for Girls Inc. And I think that legitimacy and us really authentically standing behind, what we say has definitely kept our members engaged, interested, and also because they feel like they're contributing to this mission as well.
So a lot of that's around like the real world impact that you're bringing, like in terms of like tangible change.
Yes, and I think also just for the women who are maybe not the honorees or were not nominated, just participating and belonging to a community that they feel, recognizes and supports them as professionals. But also, like I said, just feeling like you are contributing to that larger, like tangible cause.
Cool. Erica, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh, I have more of a general idea of how I feel about it, and having seen so many communities launch, get huge, or fail, the ones that have missions are the ones where you see the least amount of toxicity, where people know what to expect, they know what they're getting into, you're setting the culture early, and the values on Reddit, they're rules usually, your values are kind of inferred by your rules. The ones that aren't just operational. And when you have that and you're clear about it and you're consistent and you kind of your own actions reflect your mission and your values, you have a much healthier community and people are more likely to feel supported and stay.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
Couldn't
gives a
agree
little
more.
less room for interpretation as well, right? So if you're not sure if something is something you want in your community, or you're trying to make a decision, if you've kind of got something clear set out, it's like, well, it's either going to fit or it's not. I always feel like when I'm at in real life event and somebody is hosting and they set out some of the values of the meetup and kind of expectations around openness and honesty and kind of a code of conduct, and they say out loud, it changes the vibe in the room to make it feel like a safer place, especially that's how I feel anyway. And it kind of just makes it a lot more open. And I think if you can just be upfront about it and not let people just interpret how they want, I think it gives more clarity.
We have a thing called rule lawyers. If you're anywhere, I mean, if you're a community manager, whereas if you're not clear on those things, it can cause problems, and people will find ways to try to squeak around it. So, yeah, clarity is always great. Makes our jobs easier.
Do either of you have an example where you've kind of set rules and you've set kind of values and mission in place, and then time's gone on, they need to adapt, they need to evolve, and they need to adjust, and then you've tried to implement that through your community, and kind of how did that go? I imagine kind of the 10 years at Reddit, you must have seen tweaks and changes along the way.
I've seen many changes. Most of them were done by moderators, but also if you think of Reddit as one big community, even though I really think of Reddit as very separate, very individual communities, but we did have a very minimal policy when I was there early, and we had to define mission and grow values over time, start closing down things that didn't fit that, and once you make it clear, you can start doing that. But when it wasn't clear, things were able to kind of fester. So being able to have a more clear mission, set those expectations across the site has allowed it to become a much less toxic place, a place where you can go find anything, whereas previously a lot of people didn't feel as welcome. And so setting those expectations and that mission and setting those values has made a huge difference for Reddit overall. And individually in communities, they're always evolving, and I think that's also important. When you set that, when you step out and decide what you're going to do, be ready to iterate. You're constantly going to have to iterate to meet the needs of your community. And it's not a terrible thing to start broad and kind of clean it up as you go along. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you need to set some expectations.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. I will say from my side, we have obviously had to adjust and adapt. I think originally when we started this out, it was it always has been very e-commerce business oriented, which means you have all corners of the e-commerce business, from merchants to vendors to platforms. So there's a lot of interest, of course, to access this audience. And from the very beginning, we made it pretty clear, you're not supposed to plug your business unless someone is asking for a recommendation, because of course this is the nature of the conversations. The conversations oftentimes are, hey, I'm starting to work with TikTok influencers. Anyone have any experience? And of course, a company that specializes in that, that's fair enough if they respond. But the difference is, pushing the agenda too hard and really balancing what is helpful and what is promotional. So we've had to refine and adjust the community guidelines as well there. And I think that a funny one, but men. So this is a network of women in e-commerce, empowering, highlighting, but there are men in there too. And at first we were should we not? And I think that we kind of changed the definition description of the community to encompass champions. So women and champions of women. And we have had some really supportive, really, great community members. Sure, they are definitely the minority in there, but it has been really nice to realize that if we make this adjustment, we also benefit, in terms of the quality of connections and things like that.
When you're making those course adjustments to kind of values, is there any top tips on how you best to communicate that with your members? Because it's not the sort of grenade you just want to throw over the wall and run away and hope that somebody catches it safely, is it?
I mean, I think first of all, if you're doing that, one of the first things you can do is actually talk to the most active. Maybe you have ambassadors, maybe you have things like that. You can actually sit down and talk with them and get their input. And it's also kind of a heads up. When you get that input, they know change is coming. And then from there, you can start talking about it with the broader community. I think the main thing is to come in and start talking really transparently early. Never drop a bomb. Never good. Don't let people have things happen that they don't expect. If you're transparent and communicate often, early and often, generally people will be fine with it, and that expectation is set. So, yeah.
Definitely. And I will say for our specific community, it's hosted on Slack. So one, we can like make a pin post, of course, but I think also just like creating a thread and being like, if anyone has any questions, and then we'll include that change or announcement in the weekly digest and link to that conversation so people can also add in there. And then we will include it in our newsletter and on our Instagram. Like if we have any major announcements, we try to be kind of like comprehensive and consistent, so that any touch point anywhere that people are interacting with the program, they know exactly what they're getting into. They know exactly who they're dealing with. And I will say also for the Yotpo customer community, I think it's the same thing, like making sure that if you are making changes, we have a robust product community. And most of the announcements are not necessarily taking place in the platform the same way that the Amazing Women in E-commerce one mostly happens in Slack. With the Yotpo community, we really need to make sure, again, that like absolutely every touch point from the website to emails to the newsletter to offline events, that absolutely everything kind of encompasses and embodies those changes.
That's a really good point, making sure that it doesn't matter if you communicate it if they don't see it. So talking about all the touch points is such a good point, and is an issue I see and have seen in the past.
I was once taught that if you're delivering news which could be seen as controversial or, it could upset somebody, you kind of always go with the highest form of communication. So that would be a case of, okay, so I'm going to try and speak to them one-to-one. If that's not, feasible in a community sense, then, okay, well, maybe actually a video is the best way of, communicating that, because something could be miscued in text. And then kind of you want like just a really cold email to be the last resort. Like if you literally can't reach them, you want an email is that, but you've got to go from the highest to the lowest first in terms of that communication, because it's so easy just to misstew like an off comment Slack type situation. You might thought there was some comedy or sarcasm in there, and actually you've just offended a whole bunch of people, because it's so easy to do that. And an emoji doesn't always just cover your style of communication, does it?
It's definitely been an issue at Reddit sometimes because everything is very textual, and because it's so, it's just so huge. Even just the moderator community is hundreds of thousands of individuals, so hard to scale that kind of communication. So just have to kind of do the best you can.
Definitely. So in terms of when somebody's kind of maybe starting something, maybe they've been appointed into a startup and they're kind of starting a community or something along those lines, and they're trying to work out where they can put their focus in terms of deciding what their mission and values are. Kind of part one of the question would be, how can somebody start to narrow their thinking to decide what their mission and values should be? And then part two would be, how can you align this with your company's commercial goals and objectives? Because those two things may not align perfectly. Ruthie, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny because obviously that is like the big issue that we're constantly dancing around. Like, while I personally, Ruthie the individual, am very invested and connected to the meaning and the mission and the value that Amazing Women in E-commerce brings to our community, I'm obviously always conscious of the fact that there are commercial goals and there's commercial backing, because without Yotpo, we wouldn't have been able to establish this community. So I think that I would say that authenticity and like just being pretty radically transparent is important. So from the beginning, we've always said this is, started by Yotpo. Yotpo is a retention marketing platform. Like, to be very clear, like we are trying to support businesses. However, having said that, the people at Yotpo care a lot about this specific cause. And not only do they care about it, they also put money kind of, where their mouth is. And that kind of like helps to alleviate like any concerns of like, there being kind of like an underlying business agenda, which of course there is, but it's not the main thing. It's not the main reason. It's not what people feel. We honestly only plug Yotpo the same way if, if someone's asking for help with something that we can specifically help with, we do that. In terms of promotion, we don't promote just like we ask the vendors in our community not to promote. But of course, like there's, definitely like a line that we're constantly towing between like, the members of our community, can we email them from Yotpo, or can we only email them about amazing women in e-commerce stuff? So we have kind of like a stage before we would email them, which is that if they're a member of the community and then they join an Amazing Women in E-commerce webinar or event, and that event is very like Yotpo oriented or Yotpo focused, or has a topic that is 100% aligned with what Yotpo is doing, then we feel comfortable because they've also like opted in, they've also signed up for this event. And so we feel comfortable emailing them, but otherwise we kind of do not touch our audience. It's so important for us. Like, we don't want SDRs calling up people in the Amazing Women e-commerce community trying to plug Yotpo, because that's just not what this community is about.
It's great.
So, like I said, I'm at a company called Heslop, and we focus on democratizing and diversifying the entertainment industry. And right now, the entertainment industry is a mess. We work with production companies. We work with nonprofits. We work with some of the guilds, and we work with creative talent, and we want to help, creative talent that has a really hard time getting in front of anyone, getting their work out there. And so when I'm thinking about someone who's coming in, I'm kind of thinking of myself coming into this. And one of the things I had to think about is, what do I want this community to accomplish? It doesn't miss the company goals, because I do want the same things, and that's the things that our community wants. So I haven't really had a lot of issues with it, but I have had to pivot a bit and focus more on collaboration and niche communities throughout these strikes to help people, kind of find their tribe and find people that they can work with outside of the guild, where they're not breaking rules, where they're still being creative, where they have people to listen to their things. So I think that has been the big shift for me. But coming in, it was all about, okay, the mission, what am I trying to accomplish? My mission for the community and what they want really aligns with the business mission. So that's just easy and lucky. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. But that's what I would think of if I was going into something where there was a big difference. What do I want to accomplish? And then how do I sell that if it's not quite in line with an executive kind of company mission? And how do I show them that it will benefit them the way that we're working with the community? Because I think that can be the hardest thing as a community manager. You know what you want, but you have to convince others that it makes sense for them too.
As a CM at a funded community, do you feel like that's one of the biggest challenges you have, is constantly kind of proving your community's worth to the large organization you're part of?
Yeah, well, we are a 1,000 person company with a lot of different stakeholders and business, kind of like, they're not different business interests, but different people tackling different elements of the business. So I definitely spend time mostly about our customer community to like prove that the investment is worthwhile, and really showcase like why, having this understanding to what customers care about, what they need, is so important for both our product development, for the service that we're able to provide, and for their general experience to reduce churn. And I think for the Amazing Women in E-commerce community, it's more just like, look how powerful and engaged this community is, don't touch it. Pretty much. Because these are people who are actively engaged in a positive interaction with the company. Like, that's priceless. We've got people who have extremely high positive sentiment. You don't mess with that. You don't want them to not trust you anymore.
That's good.
So I do have kind of an example of this from Reddit, and one of the things I did when I was there was I built out this mod newsletter, and it started out going out to about 3,000 mods. We had to scale it, figure out how to do that, and then make it make sense, figure out the formatting. And, now it's a normal thing. It goes out to probably 350, 60,000 mods every month. But one of the internal issues was that, product teams wanted to put their updates in there, but as a community overall with the mods, we really want to focus on transparency and how we're helping them. And part of that transparency is having open dialogue publicly. So there were some instances where I had to work to push back on putting updates in that newsletter, which went into inboxes and it wasn't public, which closes down the public dialogue. I don't think that the product managers were against that. I just think when you're a community, you think about that stuff really heavily, and they're just like, this is a great way to get it out to people. But what really matters when you're making changes is making sure that people, especially with moderators, they're volunteering their time, and these changes really impact them for better or worse. Making sure that there's a public post on Reddit, it's Mod News, and that the product manager themselves is there to answer questions publicly and talk about it and get the perspective of the community so they understand it. So that was one of those things where you had to kind of be like, look, we value transparency, especially with our moderators. Go out there and do it. And we would link out to them to continue encouraging the discussion, the threads where that was happening. But I didn't put the big updates in there, and I wanted it to focus on community, best practices, mods, and here's the stuff you need to know. Go talk about it. So yeah, that was never a fun conversation, but people always understood once we got into it. But, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, we definitely have to say no to a lot of people. We want to put stuff on our newsletter, to plug stuff in Slack.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always a fine balance again of what's actually going to provide value for the community members, and if it's not going to provide value, then you just have to say no.
Yeah, and people can see right through that. So if you want them to remain having that high sentiment, we know what we're doing. Listen to us. We're doing it for 100%. Everyone's benefit. So.
No, it's really good. And I think you're right. I think more so than ever, people have a filter now, don't they? They know when they're being sold to. They know when it feels disingenuous. And I feel like some of the better communities that I'm in, which are linked to a brand or whatever reason, is the ones where they kind of stay out of the way a little bit, and you kind of almost... I was in a community recently, actually, and I was like, oh, I didn't actually realize it was linked to X product. I just thought it was similar in kind of context. And then you click that it's actually funded by, and you're like, oh, that makes sense why they would want a room full of these number of people. But no, it makes sense. This has been really good. I've really enjoyed chatting about mission and community view. And I think, so it's weird, it's when we talk to community managers about their new projects and we're talking about what software they want to build, when we manage to get under the hood about what's really driving what they need, is always really fascinating. Quite often they come to us with a shopping list of tools they want building or integrations or features. I'm like, okay, but what do you actually do? What's actually driving that? Because then we can step back and really think about it. Because if your mission is to do something like this, you might think it's X, Y, and Z you need, but we've seen so many different communities, and actually maybe we can bring some sight into what you're trying to do because we are quite removed from the situation. I think when you are in the daily grind of running a community, it can be hard sometimes to step back and see stuff afresh. Do you, when you're running your respective things, do you have people you can talk to, and do you find it quite easy to chat to your peers about community situations you might be going through with your own respective communities?
Do you mean internally, or do you mean with other community managers?
Yeah, just try and bring some perspective to maybe, because sometimes it can be hard, can't it, to see the bigger picture when you're kind of in the daily day of running things.
For sure. I am part of 1 million Slack groups. I really find them so resourceful. I think it's amazing. I mean, just the way you found us, if you have a question or you want to get more insight on something, actually amazing to speak to other community leaders and think about how did they tackle it. Because when you're stuck in your like myopic yacht business, or whatever business you belong to, like, and all you see and know is kind of that environment, and the truth is you are the only person with community authority and understanding, and there isn't really anyone in the organization that you can go to get advice about community, then you absolutely have to find and connect with a network of other community managers. I think honestly that has really, really helped me in so many ways from the beginning, and even now I use those groups all the time religiously.
I would say I'm always, since leaving Reddit, I've grown a lot because Reddit is its own ecosystem. It's a very weird place to work when you're in community because it's just different. It's definitely not B2B type work. So since leaving, I've had to learn how to network, learn how to speak to other community managers, look to old mentors like Evan and be like, what's Evan doing? What's Evan talking about? Because he has tons of experience from HubSpot, Evan. And I feel like that's been really helpful. The company I'm at is so small, and we're still building out all kinds of tools. And it's easy to lean back and look at what was done at Reddit and what was useful there. But this is such a different community. These aren't, on Reddit, you have a lot of nerds that they're like, I wrote a bot. They do all kinds of things. They need all kinds of things, and they're capable of using them. So on this end, I have to look at similar communities and what works for them, and then talk to people and see what's worked for their communities, and then scale myself back to what people really need and what they would really want. And on top of that, giving people really annoying survey updates because I want to improve that for them. So I'm in the middle of one of those right now. So just asking people obviously is also helpful, but yeah, taking other people's experiences has been invaluable.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much both for taking the time to chat with me about missions and value and your experience of being community managers. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. It was like a coffee date, but just transatlantic and with wildly different time zones. And only two of you are drinking coffee. I just had water. But no, I really appreciate you taking the time. And if would be great is if we just let everyone know where the best place to find you, if they had kind of any questions or they wanted to chat to you about anything. So Ruthie, where's the best place to find you on the internet if somebody wanted to reach out?
Honestly, probably LinkedIn. Just shoot me a message and I will figure out if I should connect with you on Slack, on the Yelp community, by email. We'll see. But yeah, my LinkedIn is Ruthie Berber.
Erica?
I think my LinkedIn is Erica Carter. Probably, but definitely I can be reached there. I can also be reached on Reddit under Lil Trixie, LILTRIXXY. I do check my messages there.
Perfect.
So yeah, those are fine.
Well, thank you both. Have fantastic days, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon.